U.S. delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. This is an important time for us to come together, not just because of the threats that we're facing around the world, but also that each of our nations are joining together as part of the NATO summit. And as parliamentarians, we contribute to the overall policy debate and discussion. We're going to have a very fruitful discussion here where we'll get to hear from each of us. And I think this will help inform our debate and dialogue as we come together as the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. In 1955, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly was created, and David Hobbs, former Secretary General of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, used to say that if there wasn't a NATO PA, that NATO would have to create one. That it is such an important function that we do as the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in coming together to have a dialogue, to inform our fellow parliamentarians, and to discuss the ways in which we're formulating policy, that it is essential to the overall policy formulations of NATO itself. I was very honored from 2014 to 2016 to serve as president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and I'm certainly very proud to introduce now the acting president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, our former past president, Jerry Connolly. I appreciate that he has, for a short period, taken the presidency as we approach the summit, where he'll be able to represent us in addressing the NATO summit. You heard last night, Secretary General Stoltenberg has been very committed to the relationship with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and ensuring that we have a voice at the summit, in addition to a place at the table always with him. So on behalf of the U.S. delegation, first off, let me welcome you. And then secondly, I want to also congratulate Jerry Connolly for his service both as past president and as current president. And with that, I would like to invite Jerry for his comments.
Thank you so much, Mike, and welcome everybody to the 75th anniversary and celebration of the founding of what has turned out to be maybe the world's most effective and consequential alliance, security alliance and democratic alliance ever formed. And I think we have a lot to celebrate, and we have a lot we have to recommit ourselves to. I want to particularly emphasize not only the role of parliamentarians as the real democratic expression of this alliance, but to remind us, even in our charter, of who we are and why this alliance still exists 75 years later. We are a collective committed to democratic values. These are shared values. Each of our respective countries has different ways of expressing those values. But fundamentally, we are committed to something we share in common. And those values are characterized by the enabling of the human spirit, allowing human beings to express themselves without fear of a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Politically, religiously, culturally, economically, to be free, to celebrate one's autonomy, and to participate in a free society with free expression. We don't think that's too much to ask of a society. In fact, we're quite proud of the fact that that's what we built. If we think back 75 years ago, Europe was on its knees. The future looked very dark. The Soviets were on the march. Many of our countries around this table were occupied for a long time. A Cold War was raging, and we didn't look like we were winning. And yet, this alliance, formed in that chaos and debris, like a phoenix rising from those ashes, created something spectacular. It created a free Western Europe at that time, and it stood up to Soviet challenges. It met the test of its time, and it met the test of endurance. That Cold War raged for half a century, but we never relented. And we showed the world a shining example of what democracy, collective democracy, could do and would do. 75 years on, I don't know that any of us thought we'd be where we are today, having to meet that very same test again. By standing shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And what is the sin Ukraine is charged with? The desire to join our ranks, the desire to be a free people. And for that, they are paying a terrible price. And we must meet that test, and we have met that test. We have to sustain it. We have to make sure that we're providing the equipment and the training and the support to match the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people. And we have to see it through to a successful end. The return of sovereign territory and the permanent cessation of any threat coming from their east. And they're joining this family. So I'm proud to be with you today. I'm proud to serve as your president again. I will be proud to represent you at the summit with our heads of state and heads of government. And I'm proud so much to call all of you colleagues, because the enterprise we're about is a noble one and one that I believe is the future for our fellow human beings and a model for how collective action can be successful and effective. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jerry. When Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, he believed that he would divide NATO. He believed that we would not stand up for a democracy and that we would not stand together. He did not count on Sweden and Finland joining NATO, NATO enlarging, and at the same time, all of us becoming even more resolved to our commitment to NATO and more resolved of our commitment to Ukraine. And each and every one of our nations has stood up in providing support and weapons and assistance and training to Ukraine, but they have unbelievably stood against Russian aggression. And it's certainly our honor to be able to support them in their fight for democracy. I was just in Ukraine last week. I can tell you that not only was it incredible to hear again from the Ukrainians the effort of the work that they're doing to stand up and to fight Russian aggression and the desperateness of their need for our assistance, but everyone who is in the support role for Ukraine speaks of this as a precursor to a broader conflict. People even used the question as to whether or not this was the beginning of World War III, but underscored its importance for each and every one of us that it was not just the Vladimir Putin's desire to defeat Ukraine, but it was his broader objectives that we also needed to stand unified against. And with that, it is my honor to recognize the chairman of the Ukraine Rada, Stefanchuk. The chairman is we greatly appreciate you taking your time to be with us today, and we look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, leaders of allied parliaments, we gather together under the heavy but unbowed sky as we endure the darkest and most challenged chapter of Russia-unprovoked war of aggression in Ukraine since the initial invasion. But I will start to speak on Ukrainian NATO agenda. I want to recall yesterday's terrible, brutal Russian missiles attack on the well-known Ukrainian children's hospital, Ahmadit. It was a horrific example of a cynical and inhuman attitude to life, to childhood. Yesterday, during one of numerous events in the scope of my visit to Washington, D.C., I said that Ukrainians and Kyiv demonstrated to the whole world what solidarity is. Hundreds of people standing in life change are clearing a rubble, passing bricks from hand to hand for free those who need help, light, air, liberation from the rubble, brick to brick, from the one hand to another. Kyiv stood in traffic jam because people rushed to help their injured their children and carried water, food and basics. This is also solidarity. I really want to see each of you, each of our partners in this life human chain, to life that overcomes death, aggression, and gives hope. I really want roads to Ukraine to be jammed with the air defense system, aircraft, long-range artillery, and humanitarian aids. I fully rely on your assistance. The shadow of Russian war of aggression has been hanging over Ukraine for more than 2 years, causing a deeper wonder inflicted without provocation, affecting NATO membership states, affecting the whole world. This war has become a war of attrition, economic exhaustion, exhaustion of defense resource, moral exhaustion. Putin's regime is trying to, at all costs, to break our resistance and force the world to live by rules of the past, the law of force, zone on influence and limited sovereignty. The situation on the battlefield is hard, but your unwavering solidarity with ordinary Ukrainians, your arms, your sanction, and your condemnation of Russian barbarity, these are not just acts of political expediency, but a stand of very principles upon which the free world stands. Putin's attempt is to escalate the war by launching a new offensive in the eastern Ukraine has been stopped by the courage of our soldiers and the support of you, our dear partners. The first and foremost, a military assistance, fulfillment of previous commitments and increased deliveries of air defense system, F-16 combat aircraft, long-range artillery and missiles, ammunition and armored vehicles are critical. The Russians should give us the illusion that they can achieve their goals through war. I thank each and every one of your countries for contributing to these efforts. Second, it is Russian assets. In Ukraine, we highly appreciate the decision of allowing financial resources from frozen and immobilized Russian assets to Ukraine. However, the level of destruction caused by Russian aggression and the cost of the war exceed these funds. Everyone agreed that Russia should pay, and so we need to find the right method to confiscate all their assets. My third point is the medical needs to our brave soldier wounded in this line of duty. As Ukrainian continues to defend its sovereignty and freedom, we are working to ensure that those who satisfy so much for our country receive the highest standard of care and support. Our wounded military personnel and comprehensive medical facility for their rehabilitation. We call on our partners to help us by sharing the best practice and providing technical expertise in building this advanced rehabilitation facility. The next point is energy issue. Putin is waging an all-out war against our energy sector. It is extremely important to ensure that Russia does not set a precedent for destroying a national energy infrastructure. Otherwise, the tactic could be adopted in military doctrine worldwide. To support our efforts in protecting our power generation capabilities, we need assistance in new power generation equipment, technical expertise, and best practice in energy infrastructure. My last but not least point is strengthening of our diplomatic efforts. Increasing Russia's isolation and consolidation of the international community around the universal values enshrined in the UN Charter. Ukraine is committed to peace and therefore working to implement President Zelensky's peace formula. I ask you and your partners to become part of these efforts. Another initiative is the Crimea platform as a liberation of Crimea as an integrative part of any peaceful solution. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you, distinguished colleagues, to take part in the third parliamentarian summit of platform which will be held this October in Latvia. Thank you, dear Daiga, for the important decision to host this year's summit in hospitable Riga. Dear colleagues, Ukrainians sincerely believe and work for victory. This is a matter of our existence. Membership in NATO is a matter of our existence. Our struggle and your determination is a matter of our existence. At the same time, today, war shows that like-minded countries should stick together and when war will not come to their homes. That is why Ukraine aspires to become a member of NATO, which will strengthen Ukraine and strengthen NATO itself. We have come to Washington with unchanging ambitions. We expect to advance towards NATO membership. We expect the NATO summit to demonstrate the strength of our alliance, its effectiveness to countering today's threats, giving a worthy response to Russia's attempt to build a new coalition of evil. I am confident that our Parliament can play an important role in this process and in Ukrainian accession path. Dear friends, the world is watching and history is being written now. Together we can and we will build a future where aggression is punished, where sovereignty is respected, and where the flame of freedom burns bright for all. I would like to conclude my statement with the words of 35th President of the United States, the Honorable John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. And necessity has made us allies. Those whom God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Dear friends, thank you for attention, and Slava Ukraini.
Now for an announcement as to how we will proceed. We will begin the remarks from the leaders and delegations here today. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address their colleagues, and we will proceed in alphabetical order. These proceedings are being live streamed in English and in French. If you need to step out of the room for bilateral meetings or other business, please use the exit entry door behind the dais, which is to my right. We will pause for a 30-minute coffee break at 10:30, and then also we'll have time together at lunch so that we can discuss part of the comments that are made here today. And it's now my honor to begin those discussions by inviting the Speaker of the Albanian Parliament to address the summit, Linka Nikola.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, as one of the NATO members, Albania, a meaningful case proving that contribution to alliance does not depend neither on the size of the member countries, nor on wealth, level of development, history and longevity in the organization. It depends on sincere commitment to peace, security and freedom. We, Albanians, have gained the trust and the confidence of the United States and the other major NATO members with our firm and determined engagement in implementing the decisions of the alliance. Another proof of the trust of the alliance in Albania is the fact that a few months ago, a new NATO tactical airbus started to operate in our country. Parliament of Albania was among the first parliaments of alliance member states to ratify the membership protocols of new members. We have done this guided by the vision that a new member is one more contributor to peace, security and democracy which support each other. Investing in peace and security does not bring security. On the contrary, it fosters the democratic process, institutions and values. We in the Western Balkans feel this more. This energy is more significant when the threat of war is imminent, following Russia's aggressions against Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East. As a non-permanent member country of the United Nations Security Council, along with the United States, Albania served as a penholder in determining stances and actions in defense of Ukraine. We joined and supported to the best of our ability NATO's clear and swift actions in support of Ukraine, action that demonstrated the strength and cohesion of the organization. In the Holy Books is written, "Whoever saves own life saves the world entire." Albania is on the side of NATO and our great allies, USA and the EU, convinced that the fight against terrorism, their bases, their supporters, and violent extremism is the fight for life. I thank you for your attention.
Quisiera ahora invitar a Theo Franken, el jefe de la delegación de Bélgica, representando a su parlamento. Muchas gracias, presidente. No tenemos presidente porque hemos...
I think... okay.
That's one.
Yes, okay, sorry. I'll start again. I'm alone because there's no parliamentary speaker for the moment because we had elections and we're talking about who will be the speaker of the Parliament of Belgium. So I'm here alone, but no problem. I will make 4 points. First, what news from Brussels? We're trying to make a government. I think that this is a crucial week. Belgium is world record holder in forming a government, but I don't think it will take 500 days this time. We don't have the time, so it will go swiftly, I hope. And international security is a crucial issue on the agenda of the new government, who is going to be formed next weeks and months. More defense spending is crucial. We are at a pace of 2% for 2035. I think that is way too slow, so we need to achieve 2% of GDP before. Second, we need ground-air defense. As you know, we are one of the founding fathers of NATO, and we are also a very important host nation of NATO headquarters and Sasseur in Wallonia. So we need also ground-air defense, and we're going to buy that as well. Second point on Ukraine, dear colleagues, full support. We signed a couple of weeks, our Prime Minister signed an agreement on security cooperation and long-term support between Belgium and Ukraine, so that's a good thing. And Ruslan and Yehor, our F-16s are coming up, so we will give a lot of F-16s to your country to fight the Russians. Third point on global threats, I think it's a very good point that it's a priority for NATO and for this summit. As you know, I'm always emphasizing the role of Iran as an evil state. I think that what's happening in Gaza and in the Middle East is one of the crucial points for the future also of Europe and NATO. With Hamas, with all the proxies of Iran, Hezbollah in Iraq, with the Houthis who are attacking our ships, and with the support they give in Russia. So I think we need to tackle Iran in the future as a priority next coming years. Fourth, one point of criticism, I think we are losing Africa to China and Russia, to the PRC and to the Russian Federation, and that's a big threat. I think we have to do more for the global south. We have to focus more on Africa. It is the continent of the future, and we're losing it, I'm afraid. We have a report. We had, with NATO PA, we worked together with the GSM on the report, but it's not a priority today. I know that you can not have like 10 priorities, but I think that the South is very priority for the future. It has to be. This is a mistake because we're talking about illegal migration, drugs, trafficking, Islamism, and also rare metals and raw materials. So I think Africa needs to be a priority also for NATO in a 360 degrees approach. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Daniel Mitov, the head of the Bulgarian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Dear colleagues, dear hosts, Mr. Turner, Mr. President Connolly, Thank you very much for hosting us and for a wonderful organization of the event. First, let me address what happened yesterday, the barbaric bombing on Children's Hospital. This is an act which cannot be forgotten, and let me express our condolences to our Ukrainian colleagues and allies, and also to express our resolve that to the concept that with barbarianism there cannot be neither peace nor appeasement. The best way to demonstrate our unity and solidarity is to act together in regards to both deterrence and defense and burden sharing. Bulgaria actively supports strengthening of NATO presence in the Black Sea. The recently established task group for mine countermeasures in the Black Sea is already operational, thus contributing to maritime security. However, while joint initiatives among Black Sea allies are important, they cannot be a substitute for a robust NATO engagement and presence in the region, which is a demonstration of its ability to deter and defend. The potential of the pan-European Corridor 8 connecting Black Sea and Adriatic Seas can also play an important role in the context of the EU-NATO cooperation on military mobility. This will further strengthen the connectivity and resilience of the region as an integral part of NATO's defense and deterrence posture. Russia continues to double down in its aggressive war against Ukraine with no prospect of ending the conflict. The situation on the battlefield is critical, and a robust, predictable, long-term mechanism for coordinating defense assistance and training of Ukrainian soldiers will help Ukraine in its self-defense against the Russian aggressor, enhance the interoperability of the Ukrainian armed forces, and provide a bridge to membership in NATO. The assistance mechanism should be underpinned by a long-term and sustainable funding based on fair burden sharing among the allies. Bulgaria will continue to advocate for Ukraine's future membership in NATO as the only way to ensure lasting peace in Europe. Bulgaria also welcomes the establishment of a high-ranking senior civil representative for Ukraine to improve the coordination of allied assistance for Ukraine. And finally, we must expand our support to Ukraine by boosting in parallel the technological and defense industrial base and improving the level of interoperability. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Greg Fergus, Speaker of the House of Commons of Canada, to address the summit. Mr. Fergus will speak in French and English.
Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, on behalf of my colleague, I would like to thank our hosts. First of all, Mr. Mike Jonkin, Chairman, and also Representatives Mike Terminer and Jared Connolly.
My greetings to my fellow speakers, including Chairman Stéphane Schuck, who made the trip from Washington to Washington for this very important meeting. Our deliberations underscore that NATO is both a political and military alliance, one that is relevant today as it has always been. NATO has evolved, and it's growing. And it depends on all of us here, including our newest members, Finland and Sweden, to ensure its continued success. The declaration adopted at the Assembly's spring session on shaping NATO for the next generations covers the challenges we face. The spring session also reiterated the Assembly's indispensable role. I want to offer some thoughts on how this role applies to Ukraine. President Zelensky is concerned that with the war now in its third year, people will start to forget. Let me make this clear. We must ensure that this does not happen. As parliamentarians, we have the unique tools and the ability to shine the light where it's needed most on the brave women and men who are fighting for the freedom of Ukraine. Their fight is our fight. We must ensure that they win. Let's show the world that NATO stands together. Our alliance has succeeded for 75 years because NATO is defined not by what it stands against, but what it stands for, as they have said in its declaration, for the defense of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. Just over a month ago, we honored the D-Day landings, a massive, bold, and coordinated effort that has underwritten freedom for 80 years. That longevity is both a strength and a weakness. Increasingly, our leaders and decision makers did not grow up hearing about World War II and the transformative effect that it had on world history. The freedoms that we enjoy today came at a cost. You know, I know some of you now are Nationals fans because you went to the game, formerly my team of the Montreal Expos. But there's an expression that says sometimes we think when we were born on third base that we've hit a triple. We can't let that happen to us here. We owe it to those who sacrificed and paid the ultimate price for freedom all those years ago to strengthen the alliance. We owe it to the people of Ukraine to stand with them in support of the one strategic goal of free and democratic Ukraine. And finally, we owe it to ourselves to fight for the values that NATO was created to protect. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Gordon Jandrokovic, President of the Croatian Parliament, to address the summit.
Thank you, Madam. Distinguished host, Congressman Turner, Congressman Connolly, dear colleagues, for 75 years, the Washington Treaty and Article 5 have provided a steadfast commitment that an attack on one is an attack against all allies. This commitment and our strong transatlantic bonds have kept our citizens safe for all these years. NATO's Parliamentary Assembly declaration clearly states, and my colleague from Canada mentioned, that our alliance has succeeded because it defined not what it stands against, but what it stands for. And that is democracy, liberty, and rule of law. It is dedication to these values that must continue to guide our policies and our decision-making. But the stable and predictable global and European security order is gravely violated. Our values are under attack. Around the globe, we are faced with the rise of authoritarian actors who challenge the rules-based international order. In Ukraine, we witness new examples of Russian brutality every day. No one is spared from their vicious attacks. So, at such a critical time, we must deliver. A strong message of our firm, concrete, and durable support to Ukraine must be sent from Washington this week, because people of Ukraine are not fighting this war only for themselves. Dear colleagues, as the Alliance celebrates 3/4 of a century, Croatia marks 15 years of its membership. Unfortunately, we didn't have the privilege of 75 years of peace. In the 1990s, we had to fight for independence and defend our freedom and democracy. We emerged victorious from our war, and we wish Ukraine does the same, with just peace achieved. We will continue to help and share our concrete wartime experience, especially our expertise in demining, in post-war recovery, in rehabilitation, and in prosecution of war crimes. Distinguished colleagues, ever since Croatia joined NATO, we have warned of instability in our immediate neighborhood, the Western Balkans. We need to keep it high on our agenda, especially now when pro-Russian political forces and proxy regimes in the region clearly wish to keep this area one of potential crisis and conflict. Russian threats, cyber or hybrid, their weaponization of energy, all this must be properly addressed. If we do it efficiently, we will reduce space for Russia's malign activities. Dear friends, yes, the world is obviously more dangerous and more volatile, but our alliance has proven that it can evolve and adjust. So we need to remain bold, focused, and decisive about our investment into deterrence and defense and about our new partnerships. Croatia is fully behind this, because together we are stronger and more resilient, and that makes our people significantly safer. As responsible parliamentarians, we must remain strong advocates of this approach. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Marketa Pekarova, Adamova, President of the Chamber of Deputies of the Czech Republic, to address the summit.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the organizers for hosting this meeting and happy birthday to NATO. But while we have gathered here to Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away in Kyiv, hundreds of children are suffering. The families and doctors are doing their best to help them, because these children are diagnosed with cancer. But Russians have bombed their hospital. Barbaric, brutal aggression against the most vulnerable ones. This is what Russia really represents nowadays. This is the reason why we in NATO must act. For many years, the defense spending by most NATO members was too low. The Russian aggression against Ukraine revealed that our armies and defense industries were not ready for a conflict despite clear technical and economic superiority. It was a wake-up call. Now, most members of NATO spend more than 2% of GDP on defense. The Czech Republic is among them. We are intensively modernizing our armed forces. We are purchasing a fleet of F-35s, tanks, or artillery systems. It is a positive trend, but we must do more and take the 2% as a minimum, not a goal. Regarding Ukraine, Europe has increased its support. It provided over $106 billion in assistance. The Czech Republic leads the initiative aiming to provide Ukraine with 500,000 artillery shells by the end of the year. But even here, we all must do much more. The stakes are high for Europe. Ukrainian defeat would be a catastrophe for the continent. And Russian aggression is not only a European problem. I'm glad that the US Congress understands the urgency. Adopting the latest package of assistance was a great example of American leadership. Dear colleagues, when speaking of shared security, we must not ignore the threat in the Indo-Pacific. The US is directly exposed to the Chinese ambitions, yet aggressivity against sovereign nations and threats to change the status quo in the Indo-Pacific are equally alarming for Europe. We have to show solidarity. Czechs are stepping up cooperation with democratic partners in the Indo-Pacific in all fields. Last year, I visited Taiwan despite the Chinese threats. NATO must deepen cooperation with their Indo-Pacific partners. To conclude, let me share what late President Havel said when he led our country to NATO. Those who today refuse to take their share of responsibility for the fate of their continent and the world as a whole are signing the death warrant of their continent and the world, but above all, of themselves. Let these wise words be an inspiration for the challenging years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting President, distinguished colleagues, and dear parliamentarians. It's an absolute honor to be here together with you today, and it's a true privilege to celebrate 75 years of unity here in Washington, in the very same city where our alliance was founded. Denmark is a founding member of NATO, and NATO has been the cornerstone of Danish security and defense policy ever since. When the North Atlantic Treaty was signed back in 1949, President Truman addressed the public and he stated, "In this pact we hope to create a shield against aggression and the fear of aggression, a bulwark which will permit us to get on with the real business of government and society, the business of achieving a fuller and happier life for our citizens." Unquote. Today, 75 years later, the Alliance have indeed lived up to its promise. We have dedicated ourselves to preserve and protect our democracies, and NATO remains the most successful and enduring alliance in history. But this 75 years anniversary also marked the most critical moment since the Cold War, with Russia's unprovoked attack on the sovereign nation of Ukraine. War has once again returned to Europe. Our alliance have shown unwavering support for Ukraine. A central topic of this summit is the issue of deterrence and defense. The war in Ukraine has taken us back to an era of collective defense. It is therefore important that NATO takes steps to maintain its core task of deterrence and defense, and it is necessary that we modernize the alliance to meet the new security situation. The challenges facing NATO are not longer bound by geography, and the war in Ukraine clearly shows to us that our security is not only regional, but in fact global. Peace abroad is also peace at home. We have just expanded NATO with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden, and as a Speaker of the Danish Parliament, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our Finnish and Swedish neighbors to their first NATO summit as full members. Finally, as a military alliance, NATO not only defends the territorial integrity of its member states, it also safeguards our shared values, democracy, freedom of speech, and our individual liberty. And it promises to defend and uphold an international rule-based order which is now under attack. In this respect, parliaments and parliamentarians play a critical role. It is time of great challenge for our alliance, but time and time again, NATO has proved its ability to adapt to new challenges, to unite us and counter new threats together. And I know we will do this again. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Lauri Hussar, President of the Riigikogu of Estonia, to address the summit.
Esteemed colleagues and friends, we are celebrating 75 years anniversary of our successful alliance, and I totally agree with Mr. Stoltenberg, who said yesterday that this is the most successful alliance of the history. But we are also meeting at a time when our security and values face unprecedented challenges requiring our strong commitment and decisive action. First and foremost, I would like to emphasize that our efforts should be focused on ramping up our political and military support to Ukraine. Allies are already doing a lot, but we should be more vigilant and do more in providing long-range equipment. Ukraine's victory should be our common aim, and we should not be afraid to be vocal on that. We have agreed on establishing NATO security and training for Ukraine. Important that it really makes a difference and adds real value. There must be a clear understanding as to which tasks will be handled by NATO. Ukraine's involvement in this process is crucial for its success. Moreover, we advocate for a long-term financial commitment from all allies to support Ukraine. The purposed amount of 40 billion euros should be the minimum, as the reality on the ground shows that much more is needed. Estonian government has committed to allocating 0.225% of our GDP for military support to Ukraine from 2024 to 2027, and this shows our strong belief in the importance of ongoing support to ensure Ukraine's victory. Dear colleagues, Russia remains the biggest threat to alliance from all strategic directions, north and south, east and west. Recent escalations and hybrid actions across Euro-Atlantic area remind us that we cannot afford to be contented. We expect the leaders to stress the importance on developing NATO's new long-term approach towards Russia, including proactive measures to contain Russia's action in different domains. It is crucial that the allies react to Russia's increased and more robust hybrid activities resolutely and demonstrate that there are consequences. And As for all collective defense and deterrence, it is crucial for us now to fully resource regional plans and urgently reduce capability gaps. This means strengthening transatlantic defense industry through collaborative projects, increased research and developments, and stronger connections between our defense sectors. And ahead of our next summit in the Netherlands, we should begin discussing higher spending targets. 2.5% or even 3%. 2% of GDP is no longer sufficient considering NATO's new defense plans. And if Estonian defense spending this year is 3.4% of GDP, which is approximately 1/3 allocated to air defense, fire capabilities, and battle decisive munitions. We call all allies to meet their commitments to the security, stability, and peace in the entire Euro-Atlantic area. Dear colleagues, together we are stronger. Long live the alliance.
I would now like to invite Jussi Halla-aho, Speaker of the Eduskunta of Finland, to address the summit.
Ladies and gentlemen, allies, Finland applied for NATO membership 2 years ago and joined the alliance in April last year. I wish to thank all of you for the support that we received during the process. We are a small country with a long land border with Russia and with historical experience of Soviet and Russian imperialism. Russia is and always was the existential security challenge for us. And for this reason, we didn't neglect our national defense even after the end of the Cold War. However, much like everyone else, we did underestimate the madness of Mr. Putin's regime and believed that there are limits that Russia would not cross. We now know that we were wrong. We cannot afford to be naive about the goals and ambitions of Russia. If the aggression is not checked in Ukraine, it will continue elsewhere. Furthermore, if Russia is allowed to achieve its goals in Ukraine, that will send a dangerous, encouraging message to all rogue states of the world that the West is weak and that aggression is rewarded. The Russians do not care about their losses. They think that they can win this war by attrition and that eventually we will run out of resilience and material. We must invest more on our ability to produce weapons and ammunition and thereby show the Russians that time is not on their side. We have been talking about this for some years now, but not enough has been achieved. Finally, I would like to add that there is some speculation in Europe about the US commitment to the defense of Europe and to helping Ukraine. A more relevant question, in my opinion, is why we Europeans don't take our own security more seriously. We all must contribute more. At the national level, Finland is doing its best to set an example. We maintain our defense spending above the 2% threshold, and we have so far sent to Ukraine 24 packages of military aid. We encourage and urge everyone to do everything that they can. Thank you for your attention.
I would now like to invite Philippe Folleo, the head of the French delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit. Mr. Folleo will speak in French.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank President Mike Turner and President Connolly and the whole U.S. delegation for the quality of their warm welcome. Gerald Shee, the President of the Senate, unfortunately was not able to come here because you know that the situation in France is quite complex. And many amongst you have actually asked me about this situation. And these legislative recent elections that have seen a very high participation, the highest in the last 50 years in legislative elections. And given this political situation, we have some questions, and questions have been raised, and I want to try to answer them. France is a founding member of NATO, but France is also a standing member of the UN Security Council, and those which commits us towards the international community. First, I would like to remind you that through our institutions, the President of the Republic has a specific role. Whoever the Prime Minister is, there is the reserve domain, that is to say the foreign affairs and defense policies that give the President a sizable role, and that there will be continuity because Emmanuel Macron will remain President of France until the end of his term in 2027. And as regards NATO, there are very few political alliances in our question that question the participation in NATO. That is a consensus. As a second item, in terms of our efforts in defense, we have a budget law for the military intervention over several years that commits us to 2030. That was approved last year. So there will be some continuity there too. And then as regarding the support to Ukraine, this also benefits from a broader consensus in all the political trends in France, and there is no reason to doubt that France's commitments to Ukraine will be questioned. Of course, we share the concerns that have been forwarded by some as regarding some stakes regarding Africa and the Middle East, but we wish to remind you that NATO is a regional alliance that needs to respond to global challenges, general challenges, sure, but its regional nature is something that is essential as well. France has supported Ukraine and will continue to do so through supplies of weapon systems and through various aid, because this is the mother of all battles for the future of our alliance in Ukraine. And I will conclude by referring to one of the authors of French literature, Alexandre Dumas, who in 1844 was writing The Three Musketeers. And the motto of the Three Musketeers is all for one and one for all. And that is our motto. It's the one of the Alliance and the one supported by Article 5. And I hope that this will gather us as long as possible. Thank you kindly.
I would now like to invite Johann Wadefuhl, the head of the German delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, Excellency, I would like to thank the American delegation for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to look back in the past and also to have a first view on the challenges we have to meet in the future. Germany was admitted to NATO within the borders of only Western Germany in 1955, 6 years after NATO, the alliance, was founded. But above all, that was 10 years after the end of the terrible World War that Germany had started, and in the course of which it had committed terrible crimes. For the still young democratic Germany, joining NATO was a foundation and the beginning of its democratic development and economic success. And as far as I know, it's historically unique that Germany was the first country to become NATO member and only then establish its own armed forces. The Bundeswehr, our army, is therefore a unique child of NATO. Only NATO was able to offer West Germany the security that the frontline state of the Cold War needed to develop institutions and bring stability. And without NATO and its protection, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany would have been impossible. For this, we are eternally grateful to the Alliance and our allies, because during the Cold War, our allies
the United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, and others, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were stationed in Germany. Today, it's time for Germany to take responsibility for the alliance and to provide protection for our allies on the eastern flank. There is no discussion among Germany's democratic parties about whether Germany needs to do more, only a discussion about how we do it. We reached a 2% goal this year, and we will reach it in the forthcoming years. Today, we have integrated large parts of our army with the Netherlands, and for the first time in our history, we will permanently station troops abroad with a brigade in Lithuania. And we will continue to equip the Ukrainian army and to train their soldiers, as I will personally do in a reserve service in this autumn. So for us, for Germany, NATO's 75th birthday is a reason for joy and gratitude, and at the same time a reminder that we must do more for our freedom and security. Thank you so much.
I would now like to invite Yorgos Yorgantis, Second Deputy Speaker of the Hellenic Parliament of Greece, to address the summit.
Honorable leaders of parliaments of the 32 NATO allies, honorable heads of delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, distinguished colleagues, it is a great honor to address you as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of NATO. Today, we reflect on our shared history, acknowledge our present challenges, and look forward to a future guarded by our collective strength and unity. Greece, as more one of the early members of NATO, has always been steadfast in its commitment to the principles and objectives of the alliance. Our strategic location in southeastern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean has made us a critical player in addressing the complex security issues of these regions. Greece has always been a reliable ally, consistently participating in NATO missions and operations, and demonstrating our unwavering dedication to collective defense and shared values. Today, we convene at a time of considerable global uncertainty. The evolving security landscape, marked by the resurgence of traditional threats and the emergence of new asymmetric ones, such as cyber threats, and the strategic competition posed by rising powers like China, calls for a robust and agile NATO. The recent integration of Sweden into our alliance marks a significant expansion, symbolizing our unity and commitment to collective security. Greece attaches great importance to NATO's southern flank, consistently highlighting the critical issues of instability in the south, particularly undocumented migrants, including illegal migration, organized crime, and maritime security. In this context, we commend the decision of the Secretary General to designate a special representative for the southern neighborhood within existing structures, which we have supported from the very beginning. Additionally, Greece advocates for enhanced cooperation between NATO and the European Union. By undertaking more synergies, we can ensure complementarity of actions and maximize our collective results. Greece supports the enhanced deterrence and defense package adopted in Vilnius. Additionally, Greece emphasizes the importance of technological advancement, improved burden sharing, and the development of a strong and resilient defense industry. The protracted aggressive war by Russia against Ukraine, combined with Russia's destabilizing actions in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Sahel, and the fears of regional spillover of the Middle East crisis underscore the importance of truly comprehensive approach to threats and challenges, regardless of their geographical or thematic origin. Greece stands ready to continue its active and dedicated role within the alliance, working together with all member states to address the challenges of today and those of tomorrow. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Lorin Znacha, the head of the Hungarian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank to our American friends for hosting this parliamentary summit. We think that through parliamentary diplomacy and NATO PA, we have an added value to the alliance, such as stability and democratic responsibility. I'm happy to report to you that Hungary is already a member of the 2% elite club, and we entered a new phase in our military development. First, I would like to strongly condemn the attack against the hospital in Kiev. Hungary has taken a consistent approach since the outbreak of war in Ukraine. We condemn Russia's military aggression against Ukraine and stand by Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty within its internationally recognized border. Currently, our biggest humanitarian action plan is going forward, helping Ukraine and Ukrainian people fleeing to Hungary. We call for an immediate ceasefire and peace. As such, we support all efforts to start meaningful negotiations for a sustainable peace that will guarantee long-term stability and security for the European continent. Prime Minister Orbán, in his own role, started these talks in the last weeks and ready to continue to do so. He met with Mr. Stoltenberg on the 12th of June and reached a mutually acceptable solution on many critical issues. We support strengthening the Article 5 and a strong and united NATO. As a strong advocate of the 360-degree approach, we welcome the recent efforts aimed at dealing with NATO's southern neighborhoods in a more systematic manner. This is all the more important since NATO is facing a wide range of interconnected threats and challenges emanating from the region, most notably terrorism, illegal migration, pervasive instability, and climate change. NATO is a regional security alliance with a global outlook. Reaching out to global partners in the Indo-Pacific, as well as strengthening partnership with countries in the region, is of utmost importance. Therefore, Hungary highly welcomes the intensive dialogue with Australia, New Zealand, and one of Hungary's most significant investors, Japan and the Republic of Korea. We are working together for a stronger and greater alliance. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for being here.
I would now like to invite Birgir Armansson, Speaker of the Alþingi of Iceland, to address the summit.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, this anniversary summit is an important occasion to celebrate the achievements of our great alliance for 75 years. NATO has adapted, NATO is bigger and stronger, and NATO has never been more relevant. The membership of Finland and Sweden, which I welcome, is a historic milestone that makes the entire Euro-Atlantic area more secure. With the addition of these capable allies, the transformation of NATO takes a further leap forward. Iceland is a founding member of NATO and is firmly committed to its strengthened deterrence and defense posture and collective defense. Iceland focuses on capabilities, infrastructure, and host nation support to enhance situational awareness and operational effectiveness in the High North and the North Atlantic. Iceland's national security policy underlines that NATO membership is the cornerstone of Iceland's defense. NATO membership, along with the bilateral defense treaty with the US from 1951, is paramount for our national security. The illegal and brutal invasion of Russia into Ukraine 2.5 years ago, which I condemn strongly, poses the biggest security threat to Europe for decades and has changed dramatically the geopolitical and security architecture of Europe. Iceland remains steadfast in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. This was echoed loud and clear in our parliament this spring when 5 years Ukraine policy was adopted with cross-political support. With this policy, Iceland demonstrates its resolute support for an independent and sovereign Ukraine and Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations. It is an unprecedented step for my country, which has never directly supported the defense of another country outside the alliance, how we are supporting common policy of our allies to support Ukraine in many ways, militarily, humanitarily, economically, and in other fields. Iceland welcomes a robust role for NATO to coordinate security assistance and training for Ukraine. Allies must maintain the unity and resolve to support Ukraine and defend what we stand for. The future of Ukraine is at stake, but our common values and the rule-based international order is also at stake. There can be no peace in Ukraine unless it is a just and sustainable peace. Peace will not be just without Ukraine regaining its territorial integrity, and peace will not be sustainable without assurances of national security. This Leaders Summit must chart a credible path for a free Ukraine that is integrated into a stable Euro-Atlantic security order. Thank you for your attention.
I would now like to invite Ignazio La Russa, President of the Senate of Italy, to address the summit. Mr. La Russa will speak in Italian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, Mr. President of the NATO Assembly, I'd like to thank the United States Congress for their impeccable hospitality. Unity and a shared vision, in my opinion, are our greatest assets at NATO. It is our great strength, but unity and vision would not be sufficient without consistency and coherence. Today, consistency and coherence mean a concrete commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in this respect, we cannot and will not waver. We are side by side with the Ukrainian people. We are aware that it is important to restate that there must be real burden sharing of the burdens necessary to reach our objectives. Italy is ready to do its part. In our opinion, we must devote our attention to the issue of strengthening the southern flank of NATO as well, the south, to be able to build new, non-predatory relationships with Africa, according to the rationale behind the Mattei plan, which is dear to the Italian government's heart. In line with the reasons and the objectives of our alliance, we can state loud and clear, especially after we heard all the presentations by our previous colleagues, freedom is not free. Thank you, everyone.
Lorenzo Fontana, President of the Chamber of Deputies of Italy, to address the summit. Mr. Fontana will speak in Italian.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this summit, and thank you for inviting us. My fellow speakers, dear colleagues, over the past 75 years, NATO has guaranteed security and stability, and today, faced with imminent threats and a greatly complex scenario, it remains a fundamental stronghold for the safeguarding of democracy. Our presence here today in Washington is a testament for our allegiance and gratitude to all the men and women of the alliance, and to you, my fellow speakers, for all the work you do. The role of national parliaments and member states is key, all the more so considering the wars that have broken out in Europe and the new global threats. I am referring in particular to the security challenges in the southern flank from the Middle East to the Red Sea, and to the risks resulting from Russian and Chinese penetration, especially in Africa. For these reasons, an enhanced commitment of NATO in the so-called enlarged Mediterranean is in order. In this respect, the proposal to appoint a special envoy for the southern neighborhood must be taken into serious consideration. Our steadfast support to Ukraine stands. Today, we are here to reaffirm our concrete support and our determination to stand by Ukraine's side in their valiant resistance effort. Italy, which is among NATO's founding members, will take on the G7 presidency this year, and it strongly feels the need to share this responsibility. The issue will also be discussed at the speakers meeting of the G7, which will take place in Verona, my hometown, in September. With the present commitment, we also like to look at the future at the time that is ever more dominated by strategic competition and asymmetrical threats. Under this point of view as well, parliaments are called upon to provide their contribution at a time in which parliamentary democracy confirms itself as a precious resource on the journey to peace building. I'd like to restate my gratitude to all of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing our G7 partners in Verona. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Diego Miranya, Speaker of the Seima of Latvia, to address the summit. Ms. Miranya will speak in Latvian.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, excellencies, 75 years after its creation, the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance has significantly expanded the area of security and stability in Europe. We are as united as ever, and we are successfully adapting to the threat environment. This is the first NATO summit where Sweden is participating as a full-fledged member. With Sweden and Finland joining the alliance, all doubts about the security architecture of the region have been dispelled, and the security of our region, as well as the territory of NATO in general, has significantly reinforced. Furthermore, it is a genuine pleasure to see our Ukrainian colleague at this table. Today, our security is inseparable from Ukraine's independence. The most direct and most serious long-term threat for NATO is Russia's aggression, the military manifestation of which Ukraine is currently fighting. It is crucial that together with Ukraine, we show an unwavering resolve against Russia's aggression. It is this strength, resolve, and unity against Russia's aggression that we expect from the Washington summit, as well as the permission to use allied weapons in the territory of Russia. Through further investment by the alliance in deterrence and defense capabilities to ensure that every inch of NATO territory is protected, this is one of our main tasks. This includes increased defense spending, where Latvia is already investing more than 3% of its GDP. This includes strengthening the air defense and anti-missile capabilities of the alliance. This includes stepping up defense capabilities in the eastern flank and implementing the forward defense strategy. This includes rapidly growing the capacity of our defense industry. Secondly, our resolve against Russia's aggression needs to be demonstrated through immediate and reliable long-term support for Ukraine. Latvia has undertaken to annually provide military aid to Ukraine in the amount of 0.25% of our GDP. This is important for effective protecting of Ukraine's territory, but communication is also necessary. We need to send this message to the people of Ukraine, especially its armed forces, about our commitment to support Ukraine until its victory. And it's also a message to Russia that our support will not waver, and it will not waver with time, because Ukraine's road to NATO is a one-way, and Ukraine belongs in NATO. Demonstrating the commitment of the alliance includes the implementation of a comprehensive containment strategy. Ukraine is fighting the military aspect of Russia's aggression, while the non-military aspects of Russia's aggression in various forms are being experienced throughout the whole of NATO. We need to improve our abilities to defend our interests and take over the initiative so that we not only respond to Russia's aggression, but we are also able to actively shape a security environment around ourselves. And in conclusion, as Mr. Stefanchuk already mentioned, I too invite you to the third Crimea Platform Parliamentary Summit in Riga in October. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Victoria Kumel-Nielsen, Speaker of the Seimas of Lithuania, to address the summit.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, gathering of speakers and delegates from the parliaments of NATO countries. I'm particularly pleased that this meeting continues the format initiated in Vilnius last year, reinforcing our collective commitment to the security and stability of the Euro-Atlantic region. From a parliamentary perspective, it is essential that we as representatives of our nations actively contribute to our shared goals, especially now at this pivotal moment. Our decisions must reflect the unwavering dedication to deterrence and defense, support for Ukraine, and strategic response to global threats. Coming from Lithuania, a country on the NATO's eastern flank, I can attest to the particular pressures we face. The urgent need for deterrence and defense is not just a concept, but reality. Nationally, we are doing everything we can to strengthen the defense, but we need the support of our allies, not just to protect the eastern flank, but to protect NATO and everything it stands for. Defense requires financial investment. As parliamentarians, we play a crucial role in advocating for and securing the necessary budget allocations within our respective countries. It is our duty to convey to our citizens that defense spending is an investment, not just an expense. In Lithuania, we have already surpassed the 3% threshold. We hope that other allies will also rapidly increase their funding. It is crucial, including for the development of our defense industry, which in turn means more jobs and economic stimulus. NATO, uniting some of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, has all the means to develop capabilities that would deter any talk of impending war. Having said all this, today not one topic is more important than Ukraine. History will judge us by our actions on that. As we were gathering here for the summit, Russia launched an intensive shelling of Ukrainian cities, hitting a children's hospital. Over 2.5 years, Russia has been challenging us, systematically creating a new world, so-called Ruski Mir, in which it is normal for mothers to look for their sick children under the rubble of their hospital wards. Therefore, we must set our goals and priorities and act. First and foremost, give Ukraine air defense, so that it has what is needed to protect civilians, hospitals, critical infrastructure. Second, Ukraine must receive all the military support it needs, and it must receive it in time. This support should come without strings attached or limitations. Ukraine has the sovereign right to defend itself under international law, repel attacks from both Russia and the territories it occupies. Third, Ukraine must secure its place in the EU and NATO. Victory comes not solely from the battles fought with weapons, but also from battles fought in our minds and hearts. There is much talk about red lines. We have seen over and over again over the past years that these lines are often self-imposed, playing into the hands of Kremlin, allowing it to exploit our fears and our hesitations. As NATO countries, we must also articulate a strong response to Russia's growing conventional threat and its new escalatory campaign of hybrid and increasingly kinetic activity across the alliance. To ensure international security, we must work together with like-minded partners across the Indo-Pacific, build resilience against cyber and hybrid threats, and develop defense industry cooperation. In short, a strong, united and well-funded NATO, inclusive of Ukraine and in partnership with other democracies, is the best path to peace and stability across the Atlantic and in the world. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Claude Wissler, President of the Chamber of Deputies of Luxembourg, to address the summit.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear colleagues, over the last years, the changing and more unstable geopolitical situation has made us aware of how fragile our democracies are. For 3/4 of a century, NATO has been a beacon of unity, strength and peace, fostering stability and upholding our common values to oppose autocracy and tyranny. Today, this collective historic achievement was decisively empowered our nations for what's ahead of us. Today, our democracies are indeed under attack from outside, but often also from inside. As speakers of the Parliament of the Alliance, we bear the responsibility to stand up for the protection of the rule of law and fundamental freedoms, of free economies, the freedom of the press, the independence of judges, the rights of opposition parties, of minorities, the freedom of religion. And these are precisely the values NATO is defending. This is why we have to stand up for the continued strengthening of NATO. NATO's role in showing solidarity, in deterring aggression and defending freedom remains indispensable more than ever. The unlawful aggression on Ukraine underscores the ongoing need of a strong, unified defense alliance. As the Ukrainian people suffer a heavy toll every day, we need to do everything we can to help. But Ukraine also shows the way. We not only need to defend our territories, but also every inch of our democratic institutions, values and ideals. This is why Luxembourg stands firmly with Ukraine in its struggle for democracy and independence. Luxembourg has allocated 16% of its defense budget over the past 2 years to support Ukraine. Luxembourg is also actively involved in joint acquisition programs and capacity coalitions, highlighting our proactive stance in aiding Ukraine's defense. We pledge to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine on the path towards membership. Dear Excellencies, Luxembourg will honor its pledges. The Luxembourg government has put on the table a plan to reach the 2% mark by 2030, accelerating from our original plan set for 2035. To boost internal capacity, we intensified our efforts to integrate Luxembourg industry and research into the European defense value chain. A key step in this endeavor was the establishment of a defense, technology and innovation community. Luxembourg, ranking among the top 5 nations in meeting the 20% expenditure guideline for heavy equipment, will continue to enhance NATO's strategic capabilities in areas where we lead, such as satellite communication and cybersecurity, providing the alliance with cutting-edge technology in an increasingly complex security environment. Luxembourg already ranks 8th in terms of per capita investment in defense. Luxembourg's new commitment to integrated air missile defense infrastructure project and its continuous support for NATO's AWACS aircraft replacement program also emphasizes our dedication to bolstering collective defense. This is certainly a small but sincere contribution to help upholding the values of freedom, democracy and peace, as well as protecting our nations and ensuring a better tomorrow. Thank you for your attention.
I would now like to invite Dusko Stepovic, the head of the Montenegrin delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me the floor. Distinguished speakers of Parliament, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, please allow me to express my gratitude for the opportunity to address you on behalf of the Montenegrin delegation this special occasion, an important moment, standing on our common path so close to the Washington NATO Summit 2024, marking 75th anniversary of NATO. Stating that democracy and freedom are our common values, NATO Parliamentary Assembly has placed its position on shared values among the member states at the core of our decisions that recommend NATO's response to the pressing challenges of our time. Facing with persistent threat of terrorism and instability, cyber and hybrid attacks and disinformation, our countries must ground their response in our commitment to the fundamental values of democracy, rule of law, freedom and respect of human rights. To keep on that path, it is important to confirm investing in our defense efforts over the long term, reinforce our alliances and collective defense, and strengthen the resilience of our societies. Together, we have to make our strong efforts to keep parliamentary diplomacy alive, while our parliamentary institutions actively fulfill their roles as holders of democracy and rules-based world order as its strongest pillars. Dear colleagues, on this special occasion standing at the door of Washington NATO Summit 2024, we should display our unwavering support to Ukrainian efforts to prevail against Russian aggression, as well as send strong support to the countries who want to join NATO and decisively implement the standards to become a part of our unique family of democracies. A crucial political priority for Montenegro within NATO is to advocate for the Euro-Atlantic perspective of the whole Western Balkans, given its strategic importance for the stability of the entire European and Euro-Atlantic zone. Not so incredibly big, but incredibly eager to uphold the principle of justice and common values, Montenegro stays a credible member. I thank you for your attention.
We will now take a brief coffee break and reconvene at 11 o'clock a.m. sharp. That's 30 minutes from now. Please proceed through the main doors and down one floor to the Cannon Rotunda, where coffee and refreshments will be served. Again, we will reconvene at 11 a.m. sharp. Thank you.
Here, and then it kept going off.
Please take your seats. Our session will resume momentarily.
Gentlemen, we will now reconvene the summit to hear from our NATO colleagues. I would like now to invite Martin Bosma, President of the House of Representatives of the Netherlands, to address the summit.
Thank you so much. Dear friends, yesterday's atrocities once again underlined the importance of the NATO alliance. The vicious attack on the Children's Hospital in Kiev illustrates that more than ever the world is a dangerous place, and it illustrates the continued relevance of NATO. 75 years ago, 12 countries started this alliance for freedom and safety, and now 75 years later, we stand here with 32 allies representing our parliaments here today. Dear colleagues, the world is less safe than it was. The Russian invasion of Ukraine shows us more than ever the importance of our military cooperation to ensure our enduring security and strengthening our defense. For the Netherlands, NATO has always been and will remain cornerstone of our collective defense and protection. Our country has been part of the alliance from day one. When the Netherlands was faced with floods in 1953, it was NATO that provided aid, material, and soldiers to help the people in the disaster area of Zeeland and to strengthen our dikes. We are forever grateful for that. Today we participate in some 20 NATO missions worldwide. For example, Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO exercise, but also Bison Dravsko in Poland, Trident Juncture in Norway, and Baltops in the Baltic Sea. We're only a small country, but in the 75-year history of NATO, already 3 of my fellow countrymen have been Secretary General of the Alliance. Dirk Sticker, who signed the original treaty, became Secretary General in 1961. Joseph Luns and Jaap de Hoop Scheffer were also at the helm. And now a 4th Dutchman will take this incredible responsibility. Mark Rutte, our longest-serving Prime Minister, will become Secretary General of the Alliance. Once again, this illustrates our steadfast commitment to contribute to the success of NATO. We wish him all the best. Thank you so much, American friends, for hosting us. I hope to see all of you, all our colleagues, next year for the NATO conference, the NATO summit in The Hague. It will be a challenge for us to organize it as perfectly as our American counterparts have done so far, but we will at least try. The only thing I can promise, different temperatures and less humidity. Thank you so much.
Love it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to invite Afrim Gashi, President of the Assembly of the Republic of North Macedonia, to address the summit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me particular honor and pleasure to take part in this event of the highest level for a fitting commemoration of the 75th Jubilee of the establishment of the strongest security alliance in the world, NATO. While welcoming this Jubilee, allow me to express my wholehearted congratulations to Sweden and Finland on their NATO accession, which significantly strengthens the alliance. It is more than clear that NATO can be prepared to defend every inch of Allied territory at all times, in accordance with Article 5, only when it is united, strong, and cohesive. However, the sustainability of this function requires all of us to maintain the continued fulfillment of the undertaken defense investment measures of at least 2% of the GDP annually for defense spending. A few months ago, the Assembly of North Macedonia adopted a declaration whereby we marked the 4th anniversary of the country's NATO membership and the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the alliance, thus manifesting awareness of the responsibility to fulfill the obligation arising from NATO membership and the contribution to the realization of the collective defense. At the same time, as Assembly, we have lent our support to joint decision of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly to defend shared democratic values through the establishing a Democratic Resilience Center at NATO headquarters. Since its initial stage, we stand by it, further reaffirming this through the declaration adopted at the recent spring session in Sofia. We are aware that we are NATO member state in a fragile region in which not all countries are members of NATO or have a varying level of partnership with the alliance, as well as many malign external influences. However, we remain committed to promoting an atmosphere and policy of regional stability. We realize this by continuing the tangible contribution to the KFOR cooperation of NATO in Kosovo, and in light of the current security challenges, we are active in the NATO mission in Iraq and the resolute support for Ukraine. These challenges also call for raising of the level of the unique and essential partnership with the European Union in order to strengthen its strategic complementarity with NATO. All member states and their parliaments should devote special attention to the NATO-EU structural dialogue, which encompasses resilience, protection of the critical infrastructure, continued support for Ukraine, and improvement of the capacities of the defense industry. And to conclude, naturally, I would like to state and highlight the importance of our vocalness, so vocality of the parliaments and parliamentarians as an irreplaceable democratic instrument to calibrate all citizens' needs and priorities, because without parliaments, governments are powerless to realize the strategic goals they have set. In this context, I would like to stress the irreplaceable role and contribution of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly as a link between parliaments and people of the alliance and NATO. Thank you very much.
We thank you. I'm Congresswoman Ann Wagner. I represent the 2nd Congressional District in my home state of Missouri, right in the center of the United States of America. It's a joy to welcome you and to host you in our nation's capital. I would now like to invite Masud Gharahkhani, President of the Storting of Norway, to address the summit.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you for inviting us to Washington to celebrate the 75th anniversary of NATO. Inviting parliamentary leaders representing the beating heart of democracy in every NATO country sends a strong message to the whole world. Our rock-solid commitment to this alliance, including increases in defense spending, enjoys very broad support among our people. We are all united behind our core democratic values, and we are willing to defend them when needed, all for one and one for all. Dear colleagues, last month, all 9 parties in the Norwegian parliament reached an agreement on a historical increase in defense spending and investment. Norway is now among the countries which has passed the 2% target. There is a unanimous support in Parliament for big increases in our defense investments over the next 12 years, amounting to $60 billion. Last year, all parties in our Parliament agreed upon a 5-year program of about $7 billion of support to Ukraine in its war against Russia. Russia's war against Ukraine is the greatest security challenge of our time. Of course, we disagree all the time in the Norwegian Parliament as well. And our daily business to pass legislation and to approve budget is always hard. But our unanimous decision on the long-term defense plan and our multi-year support for Ukraine tells you the following. On issues of fundamental importance to our nation's security, to transatlantic security and a rule-based international order, our democracy stands firmly united and committed to doing our share. Dear colleagues, Norway borders Russia in the north. For 75 years, we have been NATO's ears and eyes in the region. Finland and Sweden, as very welcome members of NATO, will strengthen the security of our Nordic region and alliance. Dear friends, democracy and freedom are among the core values we defend in our alliance. Unfortunately, we see in the world today a growing challenge of authoritarian regimes banding together. The support for Russia's war on Ukraine from the likes of North Korea, Iran and China shows this very clearly. As Secretary General Stoltenberg recently said, the war in Ukraine demonstrates that our security is not regional, it is global. This is why it's very important that we strengthen our cooperation with our global partners. We are stronger together, and as free and democratic societies work more closely together, we will all be more secure. Thank you for the attention.
I thank you, Mr. President, and would now like to invite Szymon Hołownia, Marshal of the Sejm of Poland, to address the summit.
Thank you so much. Madam Chairman, dear colleagues, first of all, I want to refer to this hideous attack of Russia on the Children's Hospital in Kiev, which took place 2 days ago. And I have this impression, and probably this impression is shared by most of you, that it was kind of a postcard Vladimir Putin sent to us here in Washington on the summit. And there was only one word on this postcard, and this word was death. The question is if we are ready to send him back the postcard with 2 most important words I think we should put on this postcard today. The first is unity, and the second is enough. We are here parliaments, we represent people. We are not armed forces, we are not governments. These pictures of these children on the streets will last in hearts of our citizens for years. It will be like pictures from Bucha, from the very beginning of the conflict. You know, hearts of our people are broken. Maybe we should do something, you know, as chiefs of parliaments, to comfort them, to show symbolically that we are together with them, with the Ukrainian people, with these children. I don't know, dear colleagues, we've been discussing it with Victoria Chmielite-Nielsen yesterday. Maybe we should consider a common visit to Ukraine, to this very hospital. Maybe we should start the action of rebuilding it. Maybe we should invite these children to our countries for holidays or treatment. Because we are, as NATO, we are a defensive alliance, and there is no better defense when it comes to face the evil than doing good. If somebody is trying to divide us, cooperate. If somebody is trying to destroy, create together. If you will be ready to and open to this kind of acting, please let me know. We can organize something in a coffee break or in the lunchtime. Maybe it will be something, you know, our people will need. And coming back to my thesis, to what I wanted to say in the name of my country, of course the main question of this summit is what should be the appropriate NATO reaction for this situation. And there is only one response. Russia's imperial hunger will only be tamed by an independent, territorially integrated Ukraine with a robust international community behind it. I would like to resound once again in our consciousness this Ukraine victory does not only mean the physical repulsion of an aggressor attack. It also means that a powerful military alliance stands behind Kiev, and it does not take a to question the existing security system. And the most important thing, an alliance that speaks the language that commands respect. We must speak one language at every stage of Ukrainian conflict, otherwise we will not communicate. Unfortunately, at this point, it must be the language that commands respect. That is why Poland sincerely trusts that the message coming from the NATO summit in Washington will be formulated precisely in the language that commands respect. We trust that this is the direction that the whole NATO community will sustain, that we will succeed in securing long-term security in Ukraine and in the region. I want to emphasize the meaning of the new NATO training and security assistance mission and sustain financial commitment, that the NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis Training and Education Center, JTEC, which is being launched in Bydgoszcz, will become fully fledged institution, the first ever joint NATO-Ukraine institution, which would have symbolic and practical significance. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to emphasize once again, we should send from here, from Washington, to Vladimir Putin this very short message of unity, of telling him that we are enough of such pictures of children dying on the streets because of the hideous and horrific attacks of the Russian armed forces. This message should be commanding respect. We owe it to the Ukrainian people, to the Ukrainian heroes. Thank you so much.
I thank you, Mr. Marshall, and I'd now like to invite Jose Pedro Aguiar Branco, the Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Portugal, to address the summit.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Dear colleagues, we condemn in the strongest terms the Russian attacks in Ukraine that victimized dozens of civilians, including children. We are a reliable partner of NATO. We are a reliable partner of Ukraine. Though Portugal is a Western European country with no borders with Ukraine, our commitment towards Ukraine is unquestionable. We stand with NATO in its policy towards Ukraine. The financial pledge is important as well as a more present NATO coordination on the ground. We support Ukraine as a future member of the alliance. There is a consensus among the Portuguese in support of the Ukrainian cause. Recently, a group of war wounded that are being treated in Portugal was cheerily applauded at the plenary session in Parliament by all political forces. In my country, there is a consciousness that the conflict in Ukraine is also a fight for freedom. The freedom of democracy that took us so much time and effort and suffering to regain after decades of dictatorship. This year, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Carnation Revolution. 5 decades of democracy is not much. We know in Portugal that the fight of the Ukrainians is a fight for democracy. They are fighting for all of us. My second message is related to the South. The South is part of the threatening Russian strategy. The alliance cannot ignore it. The southern flank must be perceived in the alliance for its relevance regarding the threats of the eastern flank. Russia's war strategy is not only limited to its immediate borders, nor to traditional warfare. We are all aware of Russia's hybrid warfare. This also includes disinformation on NATO and on the proposals of NATO's enlargement. The battle on the southern flank is mainly a battle of narratives, a battle that the West could lose if we keep ignoring it. This is why Portugal remains so actively vocal about the need to effectively engage NATO 360 degrees. Fortunately, the report produced by the Independent Expert Group on the Southern Neighborhood gives some interesting suggestions that we hope the Alliance will take into consideration during the summit. Taking care of the South does not mean forgetting the East, nor does taking care of the East means forgetting the South. We need to listen more and more carefully to our southern neighbors. We need more dialogue and we need to communicate better. Thank you so much.
We thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would now like to invite Nicolae Ionel Ciucă, President of the Senate of Romania, to address the summit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, we celebrate 75 years of unwavering commitment to peace, security, and collective defense. For 75 years, we all have forged, step by step, the most powerful military alliance the world has ever seen. NATO has stood as the cornerstone of transatlantic security since its inception, providing a shield of stability and a beacon of democratic values. The Alliance's principles of mutual defense and cooperative security have never been more crucial, especially as we navigate the complex and evolving threats of the 21st century. Romania, member of NATO since 2004, has continually demonstrated its dedication to the Alliance's objectives. Our strategic locations on NATO's eastern flank places us at the forefront of both defense and deterrence. Romania has consistently met and exceeded its defense spending commitments, enhancing our military capabilities and contributing to NATO missions and operations worldwide. Our men and women are actively engaged in safeguarding peace from Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, reflecting our steadfast commitment to regional and global security. This summit offers us a unique opportunity to address the pressing challenges that our alliance is facing. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine underscores the urgency of our collective response to aggression and the importance of supporting our partners in their pursuit of sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are also condemning the Russian strike on Ukrainian hospital. Our partners are fighting for the good side of history, for the same values we believe in. The challenges we face as NATO members and allies are a mixture of old wars and new wars, of past and future, of military tactics and technological advancements. We have to find the right balance to protect our fundamental values without changing or losing them on the way. Moreover, we must focus on strengthening our defense industrial base to ensure that NATO remains capable and ready to defend every inch of its territory. It's also obvious that we must keep a strong NATO presence in the Black Sea region. In addition, we need to increase the level of political dialogue and practical support for the other Eastern partners, especially the Republic of Moldova and Georgia. Looking ahead, Romania will continue to advocate for enhanced cooperation and burden sharing within the alliance. We believe in a robust and resilient NATO that adapts to new threats, including cyber warfare and hybrid tactics. Our commitment to NATO's future is unwavering, and we are ready to contribute to the strategic decisions that will shape the next 75 years of our alliance. In conclusion, the strength of NATO lies in our unity and our shared values. As we commemorate this significant milestone, let us renew our commitment to peace, security, and democracy. Together, we will ensure that NATO remains a powerful force for good in an increasingly complex world. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Thomas Valasek, head of the Slovakian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Many thanks, Chairman, and first of all, thanks to all of our hosts for their gracious hospitality. This will be the third summit dominated by the Russian attack, not only on Ukraine, but on the European security architecture as such. The alliance has responded admirably with the deployment of 4 additional battle groups to the frontline states, being just one of the most important and groundbreaking measures to have been taken to date. I'd like to express our gratitude to our Czech colleagues for having led the force in Slovakia since its inception, and to our Spanish colleagues who have taken over from the Czech ones just recently. Muchas gracias. Despite many predictions to the contrary, Ukraine is still standing and fighting. While we all wish for peace soon, the shortest path to the end of violence lies through our continued military support to Ukraine. It is clear that Vladimir Putin will not stop until he sees a realistic chance of further military advances. So let's help him see the futility of further violence, such as the despicable attack on the Children's Hospital yesterday. The subject of military support has been a delicate one in Slovakia, but I'm happy to report that aid continues to flow from our defense companies. In fact, if anything, it has grown in recent months, despite the political changes. This kind of resilience will be essential for Ukraine to be ready for any future talks. We urge the alliance to put in place measures at the summit that guarantees such support to Ukraine for years to come. We have not chosen this conflict, but now that it is upon us, let's make sure that we see it through to a successful end. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Matej Tonin, head of the Slovakian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. For more than 7 decades, NATO has guaranteed peace and security around the world. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of our alliance and its key achievements, the major focus on NATO summit in Washington must be deterrence and defense, strong support for Ukraine, reinforcing partnership, and unwavering commitment to the principles of democracy and collective security. Deterrence and defense lie at the core of NATO's strategy. In response to evolving threats, NATO must modernize and enhance its capabilities. This includes investing in cutting-edge technologies, bolstering cyber defense, and maintaining a robust conventional military presence. By doing so, we will send a clear message to any potential aggressor that NATO stands ready to defend every inch of its territory. The unity and preparedness of our alliance are our great strength, deterrent threats before they materialize. Burden sharing is another critical aspect of NATO's future. Every member nation must contribute its fair share to our collective defense. Slovenia, especially, must fulfill our promises. This is not just a financial obligation, it's a moral duty. Every country benefits from the security provided by NATO, and each must invest in that security. Increased defense spending, contributions to missions, and participation in joint exercises all ensure that NATO remains resilient and capable of facing any challenges. A central focus of our current efforts in the situation is Ukraine. NATO's support to Ukraine is not merely about providing military assistance, but about backing its sovereignty and democratic aspirations. The resilience of Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression has been inspiring. NATO's open door policy reflects our commitment to democratic values and collective security. We welcome any European nation that shares our values and is ready to take on the responsibilities of membership. This policy has been a source of strength, spreading stability and democracy across Europe. Supporting aspiring members like Georgia in Bosnia and Herzegovina in their reform efforts and integration to European Atlantic structures is therefore vital. And in the end, don't forget, Western Balkan situation remains challenging.
I would now like to invite Francina Armengol, President of the Congress of the Deputies of Spain, to address the summit. Ms. Armengol will speak in Spanish.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for making this Parliamentary Assembly possible. 75 years ago, an event would mark the history of humanity. On April 4th, 1949, the Treaty of Washington was signed, by which a group of countries agreed to defend each other from any attack. The world at that time was drawn from this union of forces. Throughout all these years, this very powerful alliance with 32 members today has ensured security and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. But what was forged was not only a defensive border. Article 10 of the North Atlantic Treaty includes the essential requirements for membership in this alliance: the commitment to democracy, the obligation to regulate oneself by a free market economy, to be governed by the rules of the rule of law, and to treat minorities fairly. These are some of the values that underpin this pact that we celebrate today: union, solidarity, justice, and the search for peace. These are the major themes that bring us together here on this 75th anniversary. The world that we knew continues to transform, to suffer severe impacts, aggressions, tensions that endanger the international order by which we have conducted ourselves until now, the fundamental values that underpin our stability, and with it the stability of our democracies, our rule of law, the possibility of our societies living in equality, justice, and progress are dangerously threatened. It has been more than 2 years since a war on European soil. Russia's war against Ukraine has caused serious global consequences. Locally, the destruction of that country, which we condemn, we vigorously condemn yesterday's attack against the Kyiv Children's Hospital, and their global consequences: a terrible humanitarian crisis, but also an energy crisis and a serious food crisis. That is why Spain once again reaffirms its commitment to the Ukrainian people, which we have maintained from the beginning and that we will continue to always maintain. And we hope that soon we are able to talk about the recovery of that country. But we cannot forget that this heartbreaking conflict, it's not the only one in the world. We can't forget the terrible situation in Gaza, or as many represented as Belgium and Portugal have stated, the situation of the southern flank. For Spain, this is undoubtedly a priority to have a very strong perspective when it comes to Africa, specifically the Maghreb and the Sahel, in order to ensure stability. The commitment to preserve united our democracies must be stronger today than ever. And parliaments are essential pieces in this. We know that this is our raison d'etre. We celebrate this alliance. Let us make it even stronger. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Karin Enström, head of the Swedish delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished speakers, dear colleagues. As the head of the Swedish delegation to the NATO PA, I'm honored to have this opportunity to address you all on behalf of the Speaker of the Swedish Parliament. And the Speaker is unfortunately unable to attend. And I also would like to start thanking our American colleagues for the initiative of this summit at a very special time in the life of my country, of the Alliance, and of the whole world. Less than 3 months after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Swedish government, with broad support from the parliament as well as the public, submitted an application for NATO membership. And this decision ended our country's centuries of military non-alignment. And I would like to thank you all for the support in this process. And to commemorate the 75th anniversary of this alliance as its newest member feels indeed very special. This also shows that the alliance evolves over time, adapting to new situations and to new generations. And it's a sign of strength and determination that representatives from both parliaments and governments gather here in Washington this week. The importance of this unity cannot be overestimated. Sweden's ambition to be an active and a reliable partner applies to both the Parliamentary Assembly and the NATO. We intend to become actively engaged in all of NATO's core activities: deterrence and collective defense, crisis management and security cooperation. And we're ready to take on a considerable responsibility for the security of the Baltic Sea, and we can contribute with a strong defense capability and a strong defense industry. And we look forward to deeper cooperation with all of you as members of the alliance. So, dear friends and colleagues, the support for Ukraine in the Swedish Parliament is united and solid. Many speculated that our commitment to the Ukrainian cause would subside as time passed. But what I see is not diminishing commitment, but a growing insight into the fact that the war is about something more than Ukraine's freedom. So, as have been said today, our support for Ukraine is not only a fight to help Ukraine. It is a fight for democracy and human rights throughout Europe and globally. So it's therefore vital that we provide Ukraine with the support it needs to take back the occupied parts of its country. This is how Sweden have chosen to face our troubled times. We do it by defending democracy and freedom, and we do it together with our allies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now want to invite Numan Kurtulmus, Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, to address the summit. Mr. Kurtulmus will speak in Turkish.
Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, dear participants, I extend my sincere thanks to Speaker Johnson and the Congress for hosting the summit coinciding with the 75th anniversary of the establishment of our alliance. NATO has so far contributed to our collective security in the Euro-Atlantic area and beyond, while we are grappling with new complex global challenges today. Since the onset of the war in Ukraine, Turkey has consistently affirmed its unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, including Crimea. Moreover, we have been at the forefront of diplomatic efforts to reach a just and lasting solution to the war. Our efforts should also focus on maintaining democratic resilience in countries NATO members support, including Ukraine. Therefore, political engagement with Rada is one of the most important issues in the table. At this point, I extend my condolences and deep sorrow for the losses of Ukraine in the latest attacks of Russia, including a children's hospital. Dear participants, secondly, terrorism is the most direct asymmetric threat to the security of the alliance. As Secretary General Stoltenberg has repeatedly noted, no other ally has faced more terrorist attacks than Turkey. While we remain resolute in fight against terrorist organizations, namely Daesh, FETÖ, PKK, and offshore
its offshore in Syria, PYD and YPG. We want to see our allies act in good faith in solidarity. It is a contradiction, on the other hand, that NATO has a goal to defense expenditures, while Turkey, safeguarding NATO's southern front, is subjected to arms restriction by some of our allies, despite the decision taken in the Vilnius summit. Turkey's commitment to the broader objectives of NATO and well-known contributions to the mission should be well understood. Last but not the least, we members of the most powerful defense organization of the world cannot turn a blind eye to one of the most pressing global issues, to the impending human catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. This bloodshed and the massacre of Israel must be stopped. There is a grave risk for the situation escalating into a regional war. In our discussions on global security, we must align ourselves with the common front of humanity for fairness and justice. We call on alliance to declare no more to Netanyahu government's aggression. We call for an immediate permanent ceasefire, unhindered humanitarian access, and two-state solution to the Palestine-Israeli conflict. Dear colleagues, it is the responsibility of NATO members to stand together to prevent war and to preserve peace. We should therefore increase our consultations, in particular through NATO Parliamentarian Assembly, to develop a viable peace perspective, as the current turbulent climate has a potential to spill over. The international governance has unfortunately lost its ability to respond to global crisis. Two main principles should guide us in our future endeavors to build a just international system. The first, I believe, should be the equality of all human beings in their rights and dignity, and the second, sovereign equality of all states. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now want to invite Sir Alex Shelbrooke, the head of the United Kingdom delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the summit.
Thank you, Congressman. And may I first of all thank our American colleagues for hosting this summit. It's brought so many people together at this absolutely vital time. And apologies from the two speakers from our Parliament, from the House of Lords, House of Commons, who are, as we speak, having to swear in colleagues after the general election. The founders of NATO knew the horrors of war firsthand, and their legacy was one of peace, collaboration and security. And after 75 years, there are some colleagues, parliamentarians around the world, who would question whether NATO and defence is too expensive, or is it a Cold War relic? And we only have to not just look at the conflict in Ukraine, but we also have to look at the written word of President Putin in his 2021 essay, which makes it crystal clear that Ukraine is not the end of his ambitions, it's the start of his ambitions. And peace is not a given, and the post-Cold War dividend is gone. And that is a difficult conversation for us to have with our electorate when we talk about increasing the GDP we spend. But that's where I believe the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is so important. In fact, I believe the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has never been this important since the end of the Cold War. Because we have responsibility to freshman colleagues who come into our parliaments, to existing colleagues in our parliaments, to really paint the picture as to why it is so vital that we spend the money we spend on defence, and reiterate at every corner that NATO is a deterrent force, not an aggressive force. And that balance of deterrence is the only thing that is going to stop wider conflict. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly strengthens the underlying democratic mandate and treaty of the alliance. It gives oversight, it gives direction to governments, This assembly, at the Spring Assembly, passed a declaration that weapons could be used on Russian territory if legitimate causes. That gives the fundamental foundations and underpinning for our leaders to be able to make those decisions, knowing that it's been discussed at a parliamentary level and a political level by our colleagues and by this Assembly. So I believe that the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is as vital as the NATO alliance. And I think it ensures the longevity of the world's longest and widest military alliance. So on this 75th anniversary, may I say, long live the NATO alliance, and may long this defensive and deterrent work.
Well, thank you all for the contributions that you have made to this dialogue. We're going to continue that dialogue as we then break for lunch. We're going to go to the Library of Congress, where many of you have been before. We're going to let the British delegation come with us, even though they burnt it once. In addition to thanking you for your participation here, I want to do a foreshadow that next year, spring session 2025, will be in Dayton, Ohio. As here we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of NATO. At that event, we will celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Accords, which brought peace to the area of the Balkans that had been just devastated by unbelievable atrocities. And we certainly appreciate our Balkan partners who are part of this assembly now and those who aspire to be so. This hopefully is a great kickoff for you for the 75th anniversary celebrations. I know throughout DC you'll be participating in other events, and you'll take with you the conversations that we've had here. If during your time in DC there are any issues that arise or that you need any assistance, please feel free to also contact my office. I know you each have your embassies to be in touch with, but if there are issues, please feel free to contact my office. We'd be glad to help you. So with that, I know there's going to be an announcement as to how we're going to get to lunch, but I look forward to our taking these contributions to our dialogue that we will enjoy during lunch. Thank you.
This concludes the NATO Parliamentary Summit. Thank you for attending, and we wish you a successful Washington Summit. For those attending the NATO Parliamentary Assembly Standing Committee lunch, please remain in this room to be escorted to the Library of Congress by the U.S. Capitol Police. We will depart at 12:15 p.m. Thank you.